In a summer of shark sightings, racist tweets from the White House, and children held in cages along the southern border, we may have lost sight of the distinct possibility we could end up at war with Iran. Some suggest we're already engaged in a tit-for-tat cyber war. Iran has seized a British ship, claims it disrupted a CIA spy network, and acted in what the U.S. says is a deliberately provocative manner in the strategic shipping lanes of the Gulf of Hormuz. And while President Trump has not authorized any military action, he has disclosed the U.S. has conducted cyber attacks on Iran and issued a stern warning.
We'll see what happens with Iran. Iran has to be very, very careful.
Joining us now to talk about all this is Karen Greenberg, the Executive Director of the Center for National Security at the Fordham Law School. And by Skype from Cambridge, Massachusetts, Matt Bunn, a professor at Harvard, one of the world's great experts on nuclear proliferation and terrorism. Thank you both for being here. Matt Bunn, let me start with you. Do you think we're on the brink of something?
I think it's very dangerous right now. We have a situation in the fairly crowded Strait of Hormuz with lots of different military forces operating, not only there, but in Iraq, in Yemen, in Syria. There are lots of things that could clash inadvertently and be the spark for the beginning of a war. Meanwhile, there is strong tensions because of the sanctions that the United States has imposed after pulling out of the Iran nuclear deal. So there's no negotiations underway to resolve the situation. So the situation is really fraught with danger at the moment, I think.
And you feel one false step could lead to something quite disastrous?
Indeed. We've seen situations before where things happened that neither commander actually wanted to happen. In 1988, a U.S. ship shot down a Iranian civilian airplane, killing everyone aboard. And during the Cuban Missile Crisis, there were all sorts of events that almost led to war that neither Khrushchev nor Kennedy ordered to happen. So there's, just like there's a fog of war, there's a fog of crisis that can lead to events that nobody wanted to have happen.
Karen Greenberg, let me ask you, there's been talk of a cyber war already underway with attacks from both sides at each other.
Yeah, it's almost like a parallel conversation that's going on in the conflict between the United States and Iran. And what you're seeing is parallel to the seizure of ships, the shooting down of drones that we've seen. What you've seen is a parallel war going on. Lots of it we know we don't hear about, but we've heard about some of it, which has to do with us attacking Iranian intelligence networks and Iranians targeting our financial and other networks. And some of it's theft, some of it's ransomware, and some of it's just to show that they can do it. But it is getting more and more intense. It's been going on over the course of the last couple of months. And it is not helped by the fact that the bellicose language from the president makes it so that he's pushing Iran further and further. You know, first he withdraws from the JCPOA. Then he declares the IRGC a terrorist organization. And then we begin to retaliate both in terms of activity and in terms of rhetoric. So I agree with Matt. We are in an extremely dangerous situation without a real sense of who would be in command to say this is what should happen, either in the cyberspace or in the kinetic space.
So far, no shots fired, but President Trump has acknowledged a cyber attack.
No, absolutely. And no shots have been fired, but leading national security experts often say that the next war, the next hot war we see, will be introduced via cyber war. And so how you make that distinction, what the moment becomes, where it becomes kinetic and violent and causes death, is a matter of time.
Matt Budd, do you think that this cyber war could lead to shots being fired?
Absolutely, and arguably there are shots being fired already in the sense that there were these mines that damaged several tankers that were attributed to the Iranians. There was the shoot down of the American drone. President Trump launched a military strike on Iran, which he called off at the very last moment. So I think we're closer than many Americans realize to the brink. There are senior people in the administration who believe that it would be a good thing to have military strikes against Iran to take out parts of their nuclear program. I personally think that would be a disastrous, potentially catastrophic move, because we could set their nuclear program back, but only for a few years, and they would likely rebuild in secret. And there are many things throughout the Middle East that they could do in response. There's a real danger of setting the whole Middle East even more on fire than it already is.
And Karen, in a war like that, huge casualties.
Listen, people have been starting to talk about the difference between the war with Iraq and what a war with Iran would be. And estimates of people who lived through the Iraq war in positions of command and official authority have said almost to a person that the Iran war would dwarf what the Iraq war looked like. And again, the allegations of they're tied to the greatest terrorist organizations in the world are just not true. And the amount of impact that Iran has been able to have in Syria, in Yemen, and elsewhere has been much less than the rhetoric surrounding it. And so I do think we are in a dangerous situation. And I think, and there's also, as Matt pointed out in the beginning, not a minor point, the lack of diplomacy that has any kind of space now. I think you might have seen that Foreign Minister Zarif has offered to talk to the members of Congress. Yeah. That's interesting because there's a hunger for diplomacy. It has to happen. And right now, there are no avenues for it.
Karen Greenberg from the National Security Center at Fordham Law, thank you very much. Matt Bunn in Harvard, thank you very much for joining us tonight.